and welcome back to another episode of From the Ground Up. I'm Bianca Miller-Cole, and I'm on a journey to creating a new brand. And the brand is High End Skin by Bianca Miller London. It's an all-natural product. It's 3 steps to elevated skin, right? And I'm telling you this because part of the journey of building a brand is trying to get PR for that very information, right? You want people to know about the brand and you want to be able to reach as many people as possible. Now, part of that journey to creating a brand and building out your marketing strategy is going to be related to PR. Now, PR is public relations. Essentially, it's being able to get the brand out into the press and with journalists and into the great, magazines and newspapers that are relevant to your niche audience. Now, they say, and this is like an old saying, advertising is what you pay for, publicity is what you pray for. I'll say that again. Advertising is what you pay for, publicity is what you pray for. So when you think about it, what you're praying for is that a PR person or a journalist is going to feature your brand in a newspaper, in a magazine, in some sort of press that is going to get you more public attention. Now, it's not easy to get PR, but there is a route to doing it. Now, I have, for the last 10 years of being an entrepreneur, I have been getting my own PR. I've worked out how to write press releases, I've built relationships with certain journalists and so on, and I've managed to get PR at various points in my business journey where I've needed it. So when the first book came out, I didn't have as much of a relationship, but I got a couple of, key press pieces. And then when the second book came out, I had more relationships. I was able to get into the press. Certainly, when I launched Bianca Miller London with a hosiery proposition, I got some press then because I was the first type of business or first business of its kind to release a range of skin tone hosiery that catered to every single woman of every skin tone. So, of course, that was something that was worthy of press. But, of course, it's only worthy of press in that moment, right? Because you're talking about it, it's a new thing. But as new brands came out and essentially copied or emulated the kind of shades of nude, or they came out with different versions of that for other products like plasters and shoes and makeup and so on, then of course that story can become quite old. So you have to think of new ways to regenerate or rejuvenate the story, right? So I, across this period of time, have had various points in proceedings where I've had to kind of create a story. Now, they say with PR, you have 2 options. You create a story or you follow a story. So creating a story is, hey, this is a new brand, this is the proposition, this is why it's unique, this is why it's interesting. Following a story would be, if a story already exists, you might jump onto that story and you might be able to talk about your brand as a result. So there are various points in the year where there are different kind of national days or national months or celebrated months where you might be able to jump onto a story. So for example, in March, we have International Women's Day. That, of course, might be that you can talk about being a woman in business or something that you've created for women, right? In October, or of course, there's a different month in the US, of which I cannot remember right now, I think it's February, you have Black History Month. So you might be able to jump onto that story and talk about being a Black-owned business or creating products for Black people and so on. There might be National Mentoring Day or National Menopause Awareness Day or Mental Health Day. Regardless of what your brand is, you can try and follow the story. Now, I have most of the time created the story. I've written a press release that I've sent out to journalists, and I've hoped that they will jump onto that story. They'll see the value in that story. But I've also at times followed the story. So, for example, during the time when Meghan Markle was engaged to Prince Harry, there was a story about her not being able to find the right shade of skin tone tights. So, of course, lots of journalists were now looking for skin tone hosiery. So that's following the story. So hopefully I've explained that well enough for you so you now understand the purpose of PR. Now, there's a few key things that I want to share with you that kind of illustrates the difference. So with advertising, so you might open a magazine or a newspaper, you might see a 1-page spread, or you might see a nice picture, glossy picture. That's typically advertising, right? Sometimes you get what is called a paid advertorial, which essentially is like an advertising piece stroke editorial. That means they've paid to be there, but they've kind of written it in a way that seems like an editorial. It's a little bit more story, it's a little bit more of an interview style proposition, but essentially they've paid to be there. Then you have straight advertising, and then you have editorial. And that's where you might want to try and get in for free into these magazines and newspapers to promote your brand proposition. So if we look at advertising, with advertising, you have paid advertising that helps with brand exposure. Typically, the audience might be a little bit more skeptical because you've paid to be there. So that can be a little bit more difficult to convey. It does guarantee you placement though. So if you've paid for the advertising, you know for certain that it's going to be on that page at that day, on that month that you have paid for it to be there. So that gives you that kind of control. It gives you creative control because you can control exactly what you want it to be in that magazine, newspaper, or online editorial piece. You can confirm exactly what you want it to be. Ads are typically more visual, so it'll be like a large-scale picture of the brand. You would just see, boop, this is High End Skin. Like, it will be a big picture of the brand. It is more expensive, of course, because you're paying to be there, but you can guarantee that placement. Conversely, with PR, public relations, it is earned. It is a situation where you have been able to engage a journalist or a magazine house or a newspaper house, right, to write about you. It earns trust because, of course, the media are given third-party validation. So that's someone else that you already trust. Maybe you read their articles all the time. Maybe you follow that newspaper or that magazine. They are saying, we agree this is good. That is that external validation. The problem is, of course, you have no guarantee. You have to persuade the media that you deserve a spot, right? That's not always easy to do. And they will control the final version. You don't get sign-off, so you don't know what they're going to say. It's a risk. You could send them the products and they don't like it, and they say they don't like it. It's a risk. But at the same time, you know that if they do like it, that validation is quite important. It's quite empowering for the brand. And the final thing, I guess, to say is, of course, it's less expensive. If you can get a journalist to agree to write about you, that is not going to cost you money in paying for an advert, but which is why it is so competitive. Now, I know in the skincare market, there are lots of skincare brands. I know that I have to try to leverage who I am as an entrepreneur, someone who's been there and done it, someone who was on The Apprentice and so on. I can try and leverage that to get into the papers and magazines, but that does not guarantee me that slot. There will be lots of other people who are well known or who are influencers or who are celebrities who are vying for that position. So I cannot guarantee that having a name is going to get me there. And you might find that some magazines will be like, well, we've already featured you before. We don't want to feature you again. They want new people. They want new blood. And I'm saying this to you to encourage you, to say to you that even if you've not had a press opportunity before, that doesn't mean you can't get it now. So I decided to engage a Fiverr expert to help me with this. As I said, I've done it myself before, but this time I really wanted to get an expert on board to help me, to make sure that they can utilize their relationships with journalists to try and get me that opportunity. And so I found Hugh. Now I want to read you Hugh's profile that was on Fiverr, right? Of course, this was part of the reason I made this decision. It was quite a sexy profile. So he says, Hugh has spent more than 20 years in corporate PR and marketing communications, serving as a PR manager for $2 billion product at a Fortune 500 company. He is freelance for Microsoft, IBM, SAP, Google, AMD, and others, right? So I was like, ooh. Sounds good. Sounds good enough for me, right? if he's helped $2 billion companies, I need some of that. And so speaking to Hugh, we decided that we would work together on creating that press release. Now that's the first step. So whether you decide to engage someone or try and do this yourself, you want to make sure that you have a press release. You want to create the story. Remember what I said to you earlier, create the story or follow a story. You're creating the story. So you're creating your pitch. So Hugh and I worked together for him to create the pitch that he would send out. So that was step one. getting him to write the press release that would go out to those journalists. Then step 2 was doing the outreach. So I commissioned Hugh to work with me to do that. So he wrote the press release, I signed it off, I agreed it. Then he went out and he created a list of the types of PR that I would want to be in. Now that's really important for you. If you're on this journey, you want to make sure you're thinking about what newspapers and magazines you want to feature in. Which newspapers and magazines will be most relevant to your target audience, so that you are really thinking about where you want to be featured and you're creating a succinct list of people that you can reach out to. Now there's very little value in just going out to everyone. Okay, you want to be quite prescriptive of who you reach out to. Now, let me be honest, let me be clear. Most journalists now are freelance, which means they often work for multiple different magazines and newspapers. Their job is to find a story. You want to create a story that they want to use, right? And they will have the opportunity to pitch that story in a variety of newspapers and magazines. So there will be lots of journalists to reach out to. There'll be the obvious ones who are maybe permanently employed by some of those magazines and newspapers. And then there'll be the freelance ones who work across different magazines and newspapers. Now you can engage someone like Hugh to create that list, or of course you can do your own research and try and find the right people on the various different social media platforms. So Hugh created the press release and then he created the list and he sent it out. Now he sent it out and we got a few responses. Not as many as we would have liked in the first instance, right? But sometimes you have to send it out and tweak it and work on it, right? So we sent it out, we got a few responses and some from some great magazines and newspapers. Okay, great. But then I said to Hugh, we need more than this. He was like, I agree. Let's work on a second version. So at this point, we of course were planning the event. So we were planning the launch event. So we thought, let's write a press release and invite them to the launch event. So we went for a second go. We wrote a second press release, we invited them to the launch event, and we got more bites. So again, we got more people saying, yes, I'd like to come, or no, I can't come, but I would love to try the product, or no, I can't come, but actually it might be relevant to a feature I'm writing on X date, and so on. So we got some more people coming through. Now I say this to say, it's not always gonna be the first time you reach out. It's not guaranteed. And I said that before and I'll say it again. It's not guaranteed. So you have to think about how you nurture those relationships, but also how you build the story. So you might wish to have a couple of press releases. The first one might be about the launch or the idea. I've created a brand. This is what the brand does and it's set out to help people in this way. Here is when we're launching. That's a pre-launch press release strategy. Number 2, hey, we have now launched and this is what we do and this is how we help. That might be press release number 2. Then you go to the next press release. That might be a case study based press release. Now it can be more about the people you've helped. So you might create a story or a narrative around someone that you've supported. So look at X person, I've helped them to achieve Y. I've helped them to increase their salary by Y. I've helped whatever that is that you have offered to them. So that's another way to engage. And then of course, there might be seasonal engagements. So you might engage them at Christmas, Black Friday, Easter, Women's Day, whatever is relevant to your brand. So you want to think about all the different opportunities you have to engage the press and the media. So I hope that has helped you. That is an insight into what PR is and why it's so important. Now I want to give you a bit of a checklist. So on your checklist, I want you to do a couple of things. The first thing is to write your press wish list. I want you to think about what magazines and newspapers would be relevant for your brand. Which ones do you want to feature in? Which ones have you seen feature other brands that are similar before and therefore it might be more relevant? Number 2, I want you to create that press release. Now you can make a decision here whether you want to engage someone like Hugh to help you with creating that press release. Now I think it's quite helpful to get an expert because they know what they're doing, they've written it before, but also you can then use that. If you can't afford to keep engaging, you could use that as a template. Or if you get phenomenal results, that is what it's there for. Right? I'm a big believer in outsourcing work, delegating work to experts, because that is going to help you on the journey. You can't do it all yourself. And so by getting someone like Hugh from Fiverr to help you to create that press release that you can then send out to the relevant press. Then you want to do the reach out. You want to start doing the outreach to the relevant journalists and press, sending them the press release, engaging with them, and making sure they understand the brand. What are the values? What is the problem you solve? Who do you solve it for? Why is it relevant to their audience? And so on. Really think with them in mind. What are they trying to create and how are they going to create it? And then, of course, you want to build upon those press relationships. So let's say, for example, someone does feature your brand. Well, make sure you keep engaging that journalist. Keep them updated with what you're doing and how you're doing it and how it's going and so on. But maybe someone says, no, it's not quite the right time. That doesn't mean you don't continue the relationship. So you might want to reach out to them in the future with other stories, with other ways to talk about your brand. And of course, you want to keep your ear to the ground about stories you can follow on from. So that's where you want to keep engaging them. And the final part of the checklist is be prepared to gift. What I mean by that is, of course, if you're asking a journalist to write about your product or service, they are going to want to know what it's really like. They're going to want to experience it from an authenticity perspective, but also from the fact that if they're endorsing your product, they would have wanted to have tried the product. So you need to be prepared to gift product to those journalists for them to try. Now, of course, that could end up being quite expensive. So you want to think about which journalists you want to offer that to, and you want to have some budget aside for that purpose. Now that's really going to help you on your journey to getting featured. And this will include, of course, from a PR perspective, you could be reaching out to influencers as well. It doesn't have to be the kind of typical journalist for magazines and so on. It might be that you reach out to influencers who are big in that skincare beauty space, who will be able to share your product. Because again, that is another way to get, public awareness. I hope that's helped you, and I hope you are working on your business along this journey with me and building your brand from the ground up. I think building a business, it's not the easiest thing to do, but it is so valuable and so rewarding. So make sure you keep going and persevere and build those relationships, because those relationships are important and those relationships are lasting. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of From the Ground Up. I've been Bianca Miller-Cole, and it is a delight to share the journey of building high-end skin with you. If you've seen us in the press, or if you are the press, make sure you reach out, because we want you to be sharing the journey of building the brand. But I also want you to be sharing this video with anyone that you think can be helped by the information that we're sharing today, because sharing is caring. I will see you next time. Thank you very much for listening.